Hey y'all, it's Jen, and this is my April wrap-up video. This month I did manage to read 10 books, or complete 10 books, and I DNF'd one. My 5-star reads for April: An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. It was probably one of my favorite books that I read this month. It is about a girl, Laya, who has her entire family except for her brother killed. Her brother was taken captive, and she is trying to rescue her brother. In doing so, she tries to join up with the group called the Resistance, and they send her to live in with the commander and be the commander's slave. During this puts her in the path to meet Elias, who is being trained to be one of the most ruthless killers in this empire. But he hates it. He is trying. As soon as he graduates, he is planning on deflecting and running away. Unfortunately, there are things that happen that makes him stay, and he ends up meeting Laya, and they form a connection and a bond, and that's where their story kind of takes off from there. Now, this book was originally a standalone book, but it was picked up to be a trilogy after it was actually released. So I'm getting ready to read the second book, and I can't wait. But you can read this book. It does wrap it up well enough that you can read this book as a standalone. It doesn't have a huge cliffhanger, but there's enough of a cliffhanger that it will support future books. So I'm real excited to see what the rest of this holds. Like I said, this is probably one of my favorite books that I've read so far, maybe even so far this year. My second 5-star read for this month was Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. She writes historical fiction based on the Holocaust, but she does it from a point of view from everybody except for the Germans. This particular book follows 4 different characters. It's written in 4 different perspectives. One is a 15-year-old Polish girl. One is a young 19, 20-year-old German soldier. One is I want to say she's probably 22, 23-year-old Lithuanian refugee. And the 4th one is a 19 or 20-year-old Prussian. He was Prussian, a young man. And it follows their journey, and they all end up meeting up. 3 of them meet up on the road, and then they meet up with the 4th person towards the end of the story, and it just follows their stories. And not only do we get their backstories, but also their stories along the road as they are evacuating. It was very heart-wrenching, very tragic. You have those stories of the resilience of these characters and their strength as they're going along on this journey. This one particularly really touched me, and there's a bit at the end where I must admit I did cry a little bit. It's just so tragic and so emotion-filled story. I highly recommend it and her other book that I read last month, Between Shades of Grey. 3 of my books this month were 4.5-star reads. The first one of those was The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness, and I read this one for my diverse book for this month, for the prompt of mental health. It did a really good job showing the struggles of the mental health issues. There is a gay character, there is a character that has severe anxiety, there is a character that has bulimia or anorexia. And then there's also a kind of a mystery because there's a bunch of kids dying in this. So there's a little bit of supernatural, there's a little bit of just regular everyday life in it, but I really enjoyed the way that story was told. Definitely a 4.5 star read. The next one that I read was The Rose and the Dagger by Renee Audier, and this is the second book in the Wrath and the Dawn duology. I really enjoyed this one as well. I loved how this story wrapped itself up. I didn't love it as much as The Wrath and the Dawn, but definitely worth a read, and obviously you have to read it to find out what happens to it. So I love the way that Renee Audier tells her stories. She's a wonderful storyteller. My next 4.5 star read this month was Gemina by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I read this one during Tome Topple. It was the only one I got read during those 2 weeks. This comes in at like 659 pages, so it is a huge book, but it goes by quickly, just like with Illuminae. It's, some of the pages are long, some of the pages only have a few things written on them. Definitely recommend this series. This one follows the story of Hannah and Nick, and the way it wraps up is told, the way their stories intertwine was very interesting. I can't wait to see how the third one and final book of this trilogy wraps all of the 2 stories together. I had 3 books that were 4-star reads. A Certain October by Angela Johnson. This book follows a girl who is involved in a tragic accident and her struggle to deal with that accident and the repercussions of it. This book does have diverse characters in it. It's a real short story. It's probably only 200 pages or so. I listened to the audiobook version, and I listened to it in a day, in probably about 5 hours. My next 4-star book was Test Drive by Riley Hart. This one I've been reading on Kindle. It is a queer romance. The 2 main characters are both male. This book, when I started it out, I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I did. About halfway through, I really loved this story. From about 60% to about 80%, I just cried the entire time. It was very emotional. It is definitely a romance. There's definitely that almost a smut aspect to it, but this one had so much story to it that I just fell in love with these characters. My next and final 4-star read for this month was Jumpstart by Riley Hart, and this is the final book in this series. It's actually really a novella, and it follows 2 characters who were best friends and kind of lovers at the beginning of their teenage years, and then something happened, and this is them coming back together 10 years later. I also really enjoyed this story. It was really sweet and kind of gave you those warm, heartfelt stories. But again, it was just a novella. It was real short. I read it in a couple of hours, but I highly recommend it. I actually highly recommend Riley Hart's books. The Crossroads series is the one that I've read so far. I definitely plan on reading more of hers. I really like the way she writes her characters and her storylines. This month I did not have any 3.5 star reads, but I did have 2 3-star reads. The first one is The Princess Saves Herself in This One by Amanda Lovelace. I've done a full review on this, and I will link that down below. I have learned over the years that I just don't really care for poetry, and this was a poet read because of the prompt for April for one of my book groups, and that was a book of poetry by a little known author. The poems in here weren't bad. they just weren't my style, and I couldn't really relate to the content of them as much. So it was only a 3-star read for me. And the final book that I read this month, my final 3-star read, is How to Be Bad by E. Lockhart, Sarah Milanowski, and Lauren Miracle. I read this book as part of a traveling book. This was only a 3-star read for me. I'll have a full review up on it probably in a couple months. I'm fixing to record it, but I don't want to put my review out there until near the time Julie is going to do her review and wrap up the traveling book. This is actually my copy. It's not the traveling book. I've already sent that one on to the next person. I was the second one of the group of 5 to read this. I will say in this one that what made it a 3-star read for me was really the characters. I didn't really care for them. I thought the premise of the book was interesting and it could have been really good, but I just didn't really care for the characters. My book that I DNF'd this month was The 17th Summer by Maureen Daly. I had actually picked this book up to read for a prompt for Pop Sugar, and I didn't realize that it was written in the 1940s until after I started looking at some reviews, because I was about 30% into this book and I absolutely hated it. I hated all the characters. The 2 main male characters were awful. The way they were written was horrible. It was very much that 1940s women should be prim and proper and housewives and not get an education, and all of that was glorified, and which was fine for the time, but that's just not the style of book that I'm into. So I definitely went ahead and DNF'd it, and I don't feel bad about it at all. So that is my wrap up for April. If you've read any of these books, please let me know what you thought of them down below. If you haven't read them and you're going to pick them up based on my review of them, please let me know that as well. As always, until next time, bye.